Welcome to True Crime Cases. Today, we are unveiling a shocking story. Throughout his life, Anderson was a man of modest origins. Having grown up in a close-knit community, he had been brought up by parents who put forth a lot of labor. From an early age, he had to make ends meet. Discovered the importance of ethics and hard effort, and qualities of loyalty that he promised to possess. One day into his own family, when Anderson first encountered Amara at a friend's, he was enthralled with her at the birthday celebration. Her humor, her kindness, and her lively spirit was contagious, and she appeared to provide light into every space she went into. They immediately engaged, spending the whole conversing and discussing their dreams at night. Amara's ambitions and stories represented everything he had been searching for, because she was fostering a companion, considerate and modest. Their affection was the type of fast-paced relationship that seemed predestined. They were inseparable in a few months. Anderson soon proposed to them in a modest yet exquisite ceremony, accompanied by friends and family. Encircled with warmest regards for an extended, Anderson pushed himself into a joyful life with his partner, into his husbandly duties, and shortly, he was a construction worker after a father. Management is a challenging position that needs expertise. He would depart the house after lengthy hours, before dawn, and come back after dark, frequently worn out but content knowing his family was supported by his employment. Every second of exhaustion seemed valuable, since he was doing everything for them. His pride and purpose were his family. All of their acquaintances, Anderson and Amara, appeared to lead a life of envy together. Amara's sweet demeanor and radiant smile, manner seemed to be the encouraging spouse who supported her diligent efforts. She looked after their house with her spouse, mindful of their kids. During Anderson's rigorous professional life, their pals frequently commented on how nicely they gave Anderson and each other praise. Couldn't be more delighted. But over the years, minor alterations started to appear and Amara seems more involved in their relationship. She is frequently preoccupied and lost in her thoughts. Her arrival home would be later than normal, mentioning different meetings or errands with Howells when Anderson requested that she dismiss his worries with a kind chuckle and a comforting pat on the arm, claiming that I'm simply busy and that you worry too much. Anderson, life at beginning, embraced her justification. Life might be busy after, particularly with two little children. Care for Killian and Daryl, yet in the back of your mind, he rejected the unpleasant sensation that persisted. It is self-reprimanding paranoia for disbelieving the lady he had such a strong affection for. But a tiny uncertainty quickly became into persistent suspicions, particularly as their kids started to develop. Killian's Daryl was their son, and their daughter was 7. Anderson loved them so much when he was 5. They were his life's joy, and he cherished each unique moment. He would return home after work with them, and grab them right away into an embrace while giggling and squealing. He lived for their laughter in his arms, happiness, and for the cherished family memories they produced in tandem. But as Daryl developed, Anderson started to take note. Things disturbed him, so he would research their cheeks in search of signs in their looks. It was him, something that many proud parents did, in observing their image in their kids. Then he noticed Killian and Daryl. Killian didn't have Amara's fair skin tone and dazzling blue eyes, but no signs of his own olive were found. Daryl also had no dark hair or skin likeness to him. At first, Anderson dismissed these ideas as unfounded. Genetic insecurities may be. He reasoned that many families were unpredictable, had offspring with radically diverse appearances, even if they shared from a single parent. Some characteristics he attempted to overlook. The persistent sensation of reminding oneself that he adored these kids more than anything else may alter that, but as the months go by, whet at him and dispelled the doubt. Obstinately, each time he glanced at, he experienced a pang of discomfort around Killian and Daryl, something he was unable to get rid of, as though his mind was attempting to communicate with him. His heart would not acknowledge that Amara's behavior developed over time. Anderson saw that she had a more elusive, becoming extra careful with her looks, giving her more attention, even her clothes and cosmetics when she wasn't intending to travel to a unique location. She also was increasingly reliant on her phone, taking frequent breaks from the room to answer phones or reply to texts as they were sitting down one evening. Anderson quietly asked her out to supper. "Who has been phoning you a lot lately?" He attempted to speak in a lighthearted manner, but like a lead, the question lingered in the air. The response from Wait Amara was subdued, but revealing that she paused for a little while. "Oh, just a little," before faking a grin. She mentioned her co-workers with wave of dismissal. "You know how it feels." Anderson desired to accept her as true, yet uncomfortable, he attempted to brush it off, deceiving himself into believing that he was being annoying but excessively possessive. He had a gut feeling that something wrong. Extremely, unfortunately, Anderson stayed up late one night. He felt as he watched Amara sleep next to him a pang of regret for having these thoughts at all. Suspicions, but the cold was too strong to ignore. His tummy tightened in a knot of fear. Why did Amara feel that way, and who was he really? As if he didn't really know her anymore. Anderson's pivotal moment occurred one fateful. He had come home early in the afternoon from labor in the hopes of surprising Amara and spending a little alone time. As he came in, he heard her on the phone at the house, speaking quietly and intimately. She hadn't heard Anderson enter and his heart was frozen in the corridor. He strained to hear her, his heart thumping. Words, "I'm really excited to see you again, Jesse." "Out of town," Amara muttered Anderson, "so that we can have the entire home too." The words seemed like a dagger to us. His deepest desire was to think he had wrongly believed that there was some justification, but the reality was unavoidable. Anderson's thoughts whirled as he attempted to process. Amara, the lady he had revealed, had deceived him and spent his life to, even worse, who knew how long she had been doing it? How much time? Anderson walked for the following few days. In a day, struggling with he felt the crushing weight of his discovery, as if he were gasping for air while drowning. As he attempted to comprehend the magnitude, he started to put together Amara's deceit. Collectively, the few discrepancies he'd ignored, the elusive late nights responses, as well as the distance that had gradually infiltrated their connection, everything suddenly made sense. He came to the unpleasant understanding that, numb and hollow, but much more unsettling, he was in for revelations propelled by Anderson's intense desire to discover the truth. Decided to take matters into his own hands and started monitoring and following Amara's calls, motions, and collecting any proof. He discovered that it occurred during one of these secret inquiries that he discovered the terrible reality that Killian and Daryl, kids he had reared and cherished as his own, this wasn't biologically his. He was more broken by revelation than anything more. The kids who referred to him as Dad, and he was admired because his own flesh was not an innocent sight, and blood, the treachery was so deep that comprehensive, which Anderson perceived as, even though his life had been nothing at all but a nasty joke, the awareness of he ate because of Amara's treachery, tearing at him like poison. Anderson turned into the man's shadow. He was once plagued by flashbacks to he couldn't believe that life seemed like a deception. Bare to gaze at Daryl and Killian, yet he continued to adore them. The betrayal was too recent, in depth, too deep of a wound. He was a parent who had a husband without a wife in the family. In the midst of his anguish, a sinister notion emerged to initially take shape in his thoughts. He attempted to ignore it in order to combat the rage that was about to overwhelm him, but Anderson had been too deeply hurt by the betrayal felt as if everything had been gone. The life he had given up in order to, family that he had loved, it had all been taken from him as weeks passed and Anderson's thinking became more and more hazy with ideas of revenge. He started making careful plans, planning every aspect of Amara's, plan her routines and the periods when he was certain she would meet Jesse. When she invites him to their house, thought Anderson had gone sick. Treachery that fueled the flames blazing within of him. Anderson finally noticed his chance. He informed Amara that he had to depart the city for a work-related travel. Believable justification that enabled him to set his strategy in action. The scene was prepared, and the only thing left to do was wait for the moment of reflection on Anderson's night was intended to be out of his job. He waited cautiously in the darkness. Amara and Jesse, inside his house, were giggling without realizing he was there and spending private time together in bed. Anderson had told her about the betrayal, was whole, and Anderson experienced his heart became icy as he observed the spectacle without. Anderson stood outside, his breathing chilled, submerged in his thoughts, in a fog of bewilderment and fury. The gloomy silence of the night around him like an oppressor. He could feel the cold seeping through his cloak, his skin and heartbeat with every muffled noise emanating from the residence. His hands trembled as he held the chilly iron. He had a homemade rod with him, weapon he never would have thought he would be even less effective against those he, having formerly loved so, cherished. The cozy glow of the lights coming from the window in the bedroom flashed shadows that mockingly moved across. He was all too familiar with the sight on the wall. His bed, the room he used to share with Amara, his haven of trust and love, was now a location of several betrayals. His mind was flooded with pictures of them together, memories of their shared dreams they had created together. It was his life, dedicated his entire being into, just to come tumbling down under the burden of. He tightened his jaw at the deception of Amara, attempting to wash in the whirlpool of. Every giggle tears him apart with emotions. They exchanged every glance and looked at one another. They all felt like kissing and embracing. Now, twisted falsehoods weave in a harsh, his children's betrayal tapestry. Before him, innocent faces flashed, and he felt his heart shatter once again. And they weren't his kids, and the revelation struck him like he had 1,000 broken dreams, devoted his entire being to a family that ultimately wasn't his. He experienced it. His inner emptiness was eating away at him. Profound emotional chasm that made him question whether, if he ever found himself in the bottom standing. Anderson felt like a stranger outside of his own house. A ghost, a stranger in his own life, vacillating for a while between anger and sadness. The instant he thought of leaving, ignoring the nightmare, seeking tranquility in a distant location. Yet the betrayal caused too much anguish, and within him, rage simmered just below the surface, requesting release. Stealing, Anderson approached the home stealthily. His shadow was as quiet as his footsteps. He could still hear Amar laughing. Now, the laughter that once warmed his heart. It was similar to salt on an exposed wound, making fun of him with its hollow familiarity. Jesse's voice was the one that snapped out of his reverie with a nonchalant. His tone was intimate as he whispered. Amara laughed at something that even Anderson tightened his hold furthermore. Iron Rod's knuckles became white as he felt a wave of rage come over him, pulled the door open and passed through. Every stride down the hallway amplifies noises of their voices. Unaware of his approach, he was hardly able to control himself. As he arrived at the bedroom door and used a force to open it, making it bang against the wall, Jesse and Amara, their laughter stopped, withering in their throats when they noticed Anderson up there, standing there with a mask of unclean. The astonishment in their eyes and the smoldering anger fueled his inner fire because he desired them to comprehend the extent of his suffering, to recognized the destruction they had done to him. Yet, even in his rage, Anderson was able to maintain his composure. And hollow as he said, "How could you?" in a whisper. Only a snarl in the voice. "How could you ruin everything we've worked so hard to create? All I gave up for you." Together, Amara fell off the bed for us. Her face is pallid, and her terrified eyes are wide. Anderson, I's voice faltered, full with humiliation and guilt, but it didn't calm the blazing fury within of him. He could see Jesse creeping up on him, attempting to stand between Anderson, Amara, but Anderson was unthinkable, going beyond his human side that once gave this woman his whole affection. Memories were tarnished by treachery and dreams broken as Anderson took a cautious step forward and lifted his eyes were ablaze from years of iron rot. Jesse paused, feeling hurt and betrayed. Extending his hands in a frantic, "Anderson listens as you try to calm him down." "I didn't mean for any of." Jesse stumbled. Anderson didn't want this to occur. Didn't want to hear the justifications, flimsy excuses from the man who had killed his family in a single, quick. He swung the iron rod in a furious pace, hitting Jesse in the head with the noise. The impact was nauseating, echoing around the space as Amara collapsed on the ground, dead. Released a shriek, a sharp sound that appeared to reverberate through the void of. She defended Anderson's soul from the wall, her terrified eyes wide as she recognized the depth of Anderson's anger. She broke down in tears. "But Anderson, for years, I had neither empathy or compassion." He had showered her with affection, all he owned, and in exchange, having broken his heart, he smiled a lot. A harsh, hollow sound that made me shiver. "Now you're crying down Amara's spine." Smirked, he understood the irony. "We're lying great as of right now." Revealing the reason for the tears, Amara gulped out a sound, and her voice shattered. "Please, Anderson, I'm so sorry that I never." Anderson's eyes were bored and intended to harm you. Into hers relentlessly. "You didn't mean to hurt me, therefore you're unforgiving. Take a look at what you've wrecked, Amara. You left me with nothing but everything." The sound of footsteps reverberating down. Anderson was hesitant, and the corridor was tiny. Looked around to see Daryl and Killian standing in. Their youthful features were frozen in the doorway. Fear as they glanced from Amara to Anderson, to the dead body of Jesse lying on. They weren't old enough to recognize the depths of treachery as well. Too naive to understand what happened, taking place prior to. The voice of their father, Killian, was tremulous. Mutter of bewilderment and terror. Anderson felt his heart ache at the view of his kids without Amara's children that he had cherished and brought up as his own. He experienced a pang of remorse, a little hesitancy, but his suffering was also taking over his thoughts. Shrouded by the burden of treachery, he commanded his voice to go to your chamber. More severe than he had planned, yet the kids who are afraid and clinging to their mom wouldn't move. Amara embraced them while shedding tears down her cheeks while attempting to protect them from Anderson's. The scene was too much for Fury to handle. A harsh reminder of the life he had lost, of the family he believed to be his host. Amara begged her to leave them, voice trembling, "They're only kids." Anderson laughed and didn't do anything wrong. A hollow sound that is sadly filled with sadness and resentment are not mine. Like you, Amara, they were never mine. Please ignore her. Anderson took the children, attempting to lead gently at first, them to safety, but their fear caused them to. He forced them to resist, frustrated, shutting the door to their room and entering, stopped them from seeing any more. Anderson went back to Amara with shock, eyes full of agony that lasts a lifetime. Treachery for years, he had maintained his pledges he made, given everything he having to do with this lady and her kids. She had torn his heart away in exchange. His chest, leaving him feeling hollow, and Amara is broken, and you don't comprehend him. A tear trickled down his face and was murmured. As he approached, "You couldn't recognize the extent of your actions." Amara fell to her knees and sobbed in front of me, pleading for pardon. Although Anderson was beyond mercy, he desired for her to experience a tiny bit of the suffering she had given him. Every second of every sleepless night, uncertainty, dejection, he desired for her to comprehend the results of her deeds, to understand the extent to which she was betrayed, imposed on. He said, "Goodbye, Amara," voice that was so deeply sorrowful that appeared to overwhelm him. "I hope you find serenity in your subsequent lifetime." And with one last, he delivered the iron rod with a vicious stroke down, taking the woman's life that he had was cherished beyond anything else in the. Anderson was standing above Amara's world. He sensed a void in the lifeless body occupy an empty space above him where his heart once was. The rage that had he was chased away and replaced with numbness that made him feel as though he was the voice of a ghost in his own life. The banging of the glass reminded him of truth, and he looked around to see Killian. Daryl is frantically attempting to flee. In his fright, he pursued them without abandon, malicious intent, but in a distorted effort to. He explains himself to them so they may comprehend the excruciating agony he had suffered, and the children slid and fell amid the turmoil, their little body down the steps, crumbling in a terrible mishap that Anderson was unable to predict. That he froze in horror upon discovering the irreparable catastrophe that had his children's idyllic life unfurled, which had become entangled in the web of. With the treachery gone, Anderson fell to. His heart was devastated. His spirit was on his knees. Broken, he called the cops with his hands, shuddering as he made the admission. Everything while he awaited their arriving, he sat among what was left of his formerly joyful house of a guy who had lost everything that had ever been important to him. Darkness enveloped him in a fitting death of the life he had loved. Anderson, who had hope and love, disappeared, leaving just a bare shell of a guy who has experienced beyond breaking heartbreak. Anderson's tale would ultimately be repaired, serve as a warning against fatal treachery, a story of love that ended in trust ashes, tragedy of a broken family beyond. Restore the man who was formerly dedicated parent and spouse was now a damaged soul is evidence of the strength of betrayal and irrevocable consequences, repercussions of anger,